Hello, everyone, and a huge thank for joining us today for a discussion on what's your telemetry data really trying to tell you. This is a Live Dev online panel discussion created in partnership with Cowsley. This discussion will last roughly 45 minutes, after which both myself and the panelists will head over to the Lead Dev Slack panel to answer some of your questions. Before we start, can I have a short introduction for my panelists? So I'm gonna start with you, Tiani.
Sure. Hi, so I'm Tiani. I'm founder of Proper Science and basically just helping organizations become more effective. We deal with lots of concepts around measurement and metrics, observability around the work system and into the technology. And my background is also in engineering and computer science, so kind of came up through different roles in engineering and eventually looking at the broader system of organizations because I found there's lots of gnarly, interesting problems to solve there.
Cool, nice one. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on to Andrea.
Hi, Andre Sharo. I'm a co-founder at Cosly. Cosly is a software company that delivers a causal reasoning system. I'm one of the engineers on the team. We founded Cosly now more than 3 years ago, and we're using it at fairly large enterprises to help them to automate, identify, and remediate and prevent problems in their critical customer-facing digital services. Prior to that, I was a first engineer at another company called Turbonomic. Prior to that, I spent 10 years at Goldman Sachs running their systems and application management engineering team. And I just find it so much fun to help people to build better operation, deliver better services, and building on their observability to actually make sense out of all of their data. So glad to
Wow.
be here.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. God, I can sense the passion all the way from here. And my name is Anthony. I am a senior software engineer at the BBC. I will be currently your host. I've had experiences with pretty much everything related to a platform of some sort, whether it's a data platform, whether it's self-service, whether it's experiments, whether it's audience, you name it. And I've kind of been involved in this. I'm really pleased to be here today. And the topic we're going to tackle is, drumroll, sorry, more specifically, telemetry data. So when we spoke about telemetry data, I think what comes into people's minds are like logs, traces, and the metrics of like everyday life, and all of which are like key components of what we assess as to be the observability of your engineering product. In broad terms, metrics are usually an indicator that there's a problem somewhere. Traces will do a similar job with an emphasis of what components or where exactly you're experiencing a problem. And last but certainly not least, logs, they often consult them in order to debug or audit or services. But any of those three activities which are part of the telemetry data can quickly turn into a hassle, whether they're like automated or not. And combined, they can be incredibly useful. However, there are many pitfalls. Have you ever heard of death by dashboards, alert fatigue, finding a needle in a haystack? And my favorite as a junior developer, when I looked at my colleague and asked, how do I access the logs? And he started by, let me get you on the system. Do you have the right do you have the rights to actually do that? And then do you know how to SSH into a box? But fear not, today I have this exciting panel with me, and we're going to start with question one. So, amazing panel. What is the latest thing that you have done that made an improvement or a difference in your team company's telemetry data? For example, something very simple, I implemented a log retention policy across our cloud estate, and I saved up quite a bit of money and reduced noise when aggregating logs. So who wants to take this one?
I guess I could take this one.
Yeah, please, yeah.
So not a very long answer to this one, but I think
that's good.
The approach in terms of the something that have improved was shifting the emphasis from more telemetry to better learning by decision making, better learning and decision making. So it's kind of shifting the approach from collect all the things to what are we trying to achieve. and then what can we reliably see, decide, and then do under real constraints. So I did that in one of my last engagements in a large corporation with several leadership teams, helping them think through what are the right things to measure in their tech environment.
Yeah, that's nice. That's really nice. I think, yeah, people often just jump in without really knowing what they're looking for. They're just like, let's just have this because we must have it, right? It's observability, but could be a bit more refined. Andre.
Well, I think that one of the most fun was as we were building our current software offering, we're offering it as a SaaS, is that I wanted to start with proper instrumentation that are helping us to actually operate these SaaS as as a number of customers grow and the volume of data grows. So it was good to start with that from day one, as opposed to having it as an afterthought. I often see people struggle like, oh, I wanted to have better observability, but it's too late because I'm already in business. I don't have time to do this. So I'm just glad that we were able to do this and continue to instrument all the components in the way they interact with each other. So it's easy for me to see things that are working or not working in our SaaS, things that are not working in our customers' environment, how data is flowing through the system. I'm just really proud of what we built so far to demo it to all of our other customers. Like, this is how you should do things.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think that too often people fall into like the pitfall of just saying, "Oh yeah, it's an afterthought," or "I didn't think about it." "Oh, it's a bit late. I wish I'd known," and stuff. And that is great. That like you two have this kind of approach that can make people think, perhaps to get things going earlier. In our quest to make monitoring meaningful and relevant, leveraging that telemetry data, how do you, dear panelists, avoid alert fatigue or worse, death by dashboard? Andrew, I think you have something to say about that.
Yeah, I think so. So I think that what I often see as I work with a number of customers over the past couple of years is that people think about like, let me just instrument everything, collect everything, and then I'll figure out what I'm going to do with this data. And then it becomes all the things that you mentioned about that by, dashboards. So what I am driving internally as well as across our customers is to think about this problem top down. What are the critical user journeys? What are the critical paths, critical data flows in your system? How do you focus on instrumenting, observing, and exposing those things as opposed to an army of data? And how do you also minimize the data so that you only collect things that are relevant to your critical journey? So really taking a top-down approach to observability rather than a bottoms-up approach.
Nice. Tiani, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, one other thing that popped to mind was this idea of time horizon. So separating signals by time horizon too. So, if you need something that's minutes, you need to know something is broken right away versus things that need attention over and some triage and some thought, maybe trending information, and then maybe improvement type data trend. Those are more trend and systemic type fix type things. So that prevents the everything is urgent type approach, which is one of the things that contributes to the fatigue.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That is a very good point. Like, we tend to look at everything just all at once, or we create an alert as engineers, but we don't really prioritize those alerts. We just have to look at it and then we just like, what's the alert about? Whereas some prioritization beforehand could actually really help you just like focus on what needs to be looked at. Well, this just leads nicely to the question number 3, which is more of a what culture question. But like, again, often as engineers, we build dashboards like we build alert, we build them just because it's something that we think it's a must-have into our organization. But we don't really look at them as much as we should. Once it's being built, it kind of like sits there. The alert sits there. It's there. You tested it. It's worked, but you don't really iterate on it. And we're trying to surface observability to stakeholders without actually checking if you understand the data and the logic that we as engineers put on display. And I think, Tiani, you did, we spoke earlier, and you did mention how you managed to bridge that gap into your approach.
Yeah, from a standpoint of thinking of that, the service and product that you're providing. So in terms of and not always just trying to guess what people need to see, and say, hey, here's what we've created now. It's going to solve all your problems, like, and let me train you how it works and all that kind of thing. So liaising, collaborating with the stakeholders, understanding what are the decision making that this data is informing. Again, time horizons can come into play. Is this trend information? Is this something's broken right now and I need an alert kind of information? Or is it something that's a little bit more strategic, long-term improvement type? What is this data informing? Because I remember reading a white paper a long time ago that said that if some data or measures are not informing some kind of decision making, they could be waste. So that's one place to start. So there's that collaboration of like, what is the context? What is the work? What is inform? What are these? What is this information informing? What is it supporting? To what end? And then, taking a stab at that based on what you hear, maybe back briefing, here's what I heard, here's what we understand, here's a sample, and iterating through that in collaboration with stakeholders. I think that's really important. So almost like kind of a product thinking, a product management, product development hat while doing this it is really helpful, I think necessary in order to meeting the needs of those stakeholders.
Yeah, absolutely love like that bit when you say, if the data doesn't serve a purpose, why are we keeping it? Why are we storing it? Andre, what do you think about that?
So the founder of Cosly, as well as the founder of the previous company, Turbonomic Schwarzenegger, every time we create a new dashboard, he asked me and everybody else, like, what decision are you going to make based on this? And before you create the dashboard, ask yourself, like, what is it I'm actually going to take? What action I'm going to take with this? And it's just a really good way to think about this. Like, is this going to help me make a decision? And if not, don't even create the dashboard or the report. It stuck with me. So I think about this every time do I collect this data? What am I going to do with this? Yeah. I think it's a good way to help.
I've thought of one more thing to that line is that the whatever charts, dashboards, their tools, they have to live inside the rituals or the operating rhythms and the operating cadence, the daily cadence of work. So that context, I think, is really important. Part of the thing that's really important is like, how does work actually happen? And because these are kind of going to slot in there versus just being something you walk by and ignore. Hopefully there's something that you're actually using and providing value.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is there like do you reckon perhaps sometimes some dashboards, like I remember setting up a dashboard for all of my data analysts that were using like the data warehouse I was working on. And it was all about like the trends, like the heat map of queries, like when's the best time to fire a query without, for like not competing with resources, CPU usage, like a lot of like information is going on, how many billions of rows are being scanned, etc. And it wasn't like a Grafana kind of a little bit complex-ish looking dashboard. Do you think that sometimes like the way you present that data can affect how people are keen to engage with it?
Oh, definitely. I think that's part of the feedback to gather and to take. And I think sometimes progressively elaborating is better than starting with a lot, and progressively add in as needed is a good way to try to hit as close to the mark as you can on what is useful and what is easy to read and what is engaging.
Yeah, fair point. And you, Andre, what do you think your stakeholders find the most engaging visually?
So I think that what Tiani said is really important to fit into how people operate and how people work. There are teams that I'm working with that are actually directly primarily responsible for operations, and they are sitting in front of a dashboard, and now integrating into their dashboard is probably not overwhelming them, but relevant data into their dashboards in the context of, I'm operating this application. This is an additional piece of information that's useful. In that context is useful rather than like, I create another dashboard for you whenever you want to go there, and people will not. But then as a developer, I don't sit in front of dashboards. How do I push information either into a Slack channel or into my IDE, which then links me back to, okay, to be able to know more about this, this is the link to either a piece of information or to a dashboard, if you will. Those are very different use cases that they may lead you to the same background information, but in the place where I live. Otherwise, if nobody looks at it, it's not much use.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And talking about these types of information, there's one that I personally struggle with a little bit. So I'm going to play the devil's advocate here. Is traces. I found in the past traces are sometimes a bit time consuming to implement. And by the way, this is the question number 4. And for those, like me, we don't really believe, I mean, there is a use case for it, but I just feel like the effort needed to add that to my telemetry, especially when I'm using lots of like different components and I have some of his information given to me by, like I say, a cloud provider. Why would I go through the trouble of adding it myself? Could you convince me otherwise, Andre? Could you make me use it? Using
Absolutely.
Your...
Yeah. I'm obviously very interested and involved in the open telemetry community. I'm one of the contributors. One of the projects that I'm working fairly closely with, it is the OBI project, eBPF-based auto instrumentation. And the point of this is to reduce that burden so that you don't feel overwhelmed by the amount of work that you need to do to instrument your application, but generating traces, for example. But the more important part is, what is the benefit? Why is this important in the first place? Because that's really an offset to, okay, do I need to do something or some things? I think that as I am developing and operating complex distributed microservices, tracing as a signal gives me an insight into how these services communicate, depend with each other. Some of those services may be bespoke business logic that I wrote. Some of those services may be cloud managed services. If I only monitor them independently through logs and metrics, I don't know who calls who depends on what. The failure of this will cause errors or latency someplace else. Traces are a key signals to be able to understand that dependency. If you're running a monolith, it's not important, but I think nowadays an increasingly larger number of applications and teams that are architecting applications are developing distributed microservices that are not just broken down into components, but they're actually data is flowing through across different applications, maybe across different lines of business, relying on external data providers, and to understand the data flows between across them, and based on that to be able to reason about the system behavior. Traces are key. And as long as we can make it easy and cheap for people to instrument the application, people will see the benefit, realize the benefit.
Okay. I'm partly convinced. Tiani, do you think, I don't know, how do you feel? Do you join Andre on this quest for like implementing traces, or are you a bit like me, just sitting on the fence, still wondering, like, okay, shall we do it? Shall we not do it? What would you recommend?
I think I'm probably a little bit of both, depending on the scenario.
That is such a safe option.
But what's on my mind as I'm thinking, when I've been thinking about traces is, and I'm thinking of like the systems thinking, or the complex system thinking hat is the time consuming objection, which could be like more like the pragmatic thinking, like we need to get things done, and you're doing this for the sake of more like to generate learning, which is a more of an epistemic versus a pragmatic approach. So I was thinking using some good engineering practice like thin slicing and figuring out the right user journeys to trace in through the system and to get where you need the key dependencies, like think through those things. I think what are the highest value things where to start with traces, that I'm thinking of those things to overcome the time consuming objection, because there's like things that take too much time often get objected to, but they're often worth it because that time you spend increases learning, which saves you time elsewhere. You get to pay the time somewhere. So I was thinking, like, what could be the analysis you put into what are the traces to build and where to start? And that's kind of what came to mind.
Yeah, I can see that Android nodding, and yeah, I'll have
Yeah.
to lend to the both of you. Like you are right. Yeah. Okay, I will try and push my team to implement some more traces now. Thank you for that.
Happy to help, by the way. If there is any open source project that we could, give advice on to you and to anybody else in the audience, by the way, I'm really passionate about making this easy and to Tiani's point, valuable. Um, this is regardless of the business that we are in. I think it's going to help us to understand our systems and think about their behavior.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, I'm all in favor. I think this is a great invitation to collaborate. We're now going to move on to another part of the telemetry data, which are the logs. Very often, the logs are considered, as is for me, the backbone of any engineering product because it can tell you a very useful story, either for auditing or for debugging. But then there's like so many questions around them, which I'm going to ask both of you, like, how many logs or how much logs is enough logs? How do you best store and organize them? How do you avoid the Russian doll situation of logs when like one logs from, let's just say, an Apache Airflow just takes you to another logs with another pipeline that was broken down somewhere else, and then to another logs because it was something else broken down. So how do we, so let me go back to that first question that has how much logs or how many logs is enough logs according to either of you? Who wants to go first? Oh, you're so polite. That's amazing.
I don't know the answer to that question. How much log is it? I don't know if it's about quantity, but about whether we can answer key operational and audit questions quickly without drowning.
I see.
So yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. And then the logs, metrics tell you where something is generally tell you something is wrong, and logs give you some local facts. And so just figuring out the right, again, using that analysis, the same you would do for like traces, analysis for what the logging needs to accomplish, and therefore back into what are the right things to collect, and that gives you then you'll end up with what you need, I think. I think that's what I've got right now on this
Yeah,
one.
yeah, of course. Andrew, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly along those lines. So what we do today in our own business and I'm promoting elsewhere is that traces help you understand the system behavior and to see where you need to focus. Now, once you say like, okay, I need to focus on this service, it makes sense to drill down and say like, okay, in this service that is apparently causing all these degradations, what are the logs, especially what are the error and critical, logs, maybe some warnings, that now understands specifically what's happening within that service. So I'm basically using the understanding of the system, by the way, to tracing to narrow where I need to focus. And then instead of looking at every single log all over the place, I am in that context looking at the logs in the time window and in the context, and especially the ones that are critical to then reason about it. And what we're doing in our own product is then to say that instead of like, let's say I want to apply some generative AI to automatically remediate a problem. If I were to send all of my high volume logs to any model, it would be either expensive or non-feasible to begin with. But if I can narrow it down to like, this is service, here's the 5 lines of logs that I'm actually observed, I come up with pretty good answers of like, okay, I think that, improve, locking in your code or improve the memory management in your code or avoid this null pointer exception in your code. And I really only needed like 5 lines of logs, but I need to know where to look and in what context and when.
I see. Like a lot of people often, describe telemetry data to me as like, like in that order, like metrics to surface something, traces to know where it is being surfaced, and logs to actually, as a combination of the two above, you've narrowed down to like exactly what type of logs you need. So are we all in agreement that this is the way you should look at it, like almost like a ski slope or something? Okay.
One thing that came to mind from an organizational perspective, and I'm not sure, maybe get your guys' opinion on this, is in an organizational perspective, when we're looking across an organizational system, the places where you see failure or problems most happen or are in the boundary crossings, like the boundary conditions and the boundary agreements are what you need. And I think that mirrors in systems as well. And that might be a place as well for logging, looking at boundary classes, crossing state change type areas, places where you know that you can often have signs of have issues.
Yeah, totally. I hear this almost in every one of our customer conversations that I am depending on these external services that are either completely outside of my business, or they are in my business, but they're operated by a different team that I don't have any control over it. And it's like, I mean, I can't say that the person never has a problem, but often, a good chunk of their problems is caused by something else. So to be able to identify that this external service is causing degradations in my service, and then to be able to say, okay, now I'm only going to look at the client logs that are interacting with that service, is helping me to see what do I need to do. Is it something that I can improve, or can I point the third-party provider or the other lines of business, other application owner, to say that, like, I think that you need to do something about this part of your service. So, and Tiana, you're absolutely right. I think that not that it's obvious when it's all under your control, but crossing boundaries is clearly where things become hairy. And I think with microservices, distributed systems, data being processed through multiple providers is becoming more prevalent.
Yeah.
Hence, tracing is important, but in general, just
No,
to be able
you
to
go back to it. Like, you find a way to sneak that one in, absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I do see, I'm going to take like the BBC an example of like more like of an internal like communications, or between the logs and all those like metrics. Like, we have a lot of dependencies between our products. And obviously, like, for example, the iPlayer front-end team and the iPlayer back-end team and the iPlayer data team, like, we all are separate entities operating according to like, legacy kind of like challenges. And sometimes we are just like pulling our hair apart and just thinking like, oh, you're sending this information for the logs, but we have like kind of like no way of actually making use of it, or we have to go and surface some other problems to another dependent team, which we had no idea they've been having these issues. It's a bit challenging, but with good communication and with just like making sure you iterate for the better, there is nothing you can solve. But the way we might not use traces is because we have such determined and ring-fenced teams. It basically means that if there is a problem in that area, then we know it's this team and we know they're looking at it somehow, and we don't need traces for that respect. But it just depends on how people are formulated. How teams are created within an organization. Oh, that was nice. Thank you for that chat. Now we're going to move on to question number 6. Right, given the sheer volume of data sources available, in terms of like metrics, log, etc., and all the data in the world you can think of in the era of big data, we often see automation as a tool being used in that field to gather and aggregate those data. But to what end? So again, like this question is more about like in testing, you don't automate everything. You don't want to have 100% automation coverage. That's impossible. Same, you can't have 100% data gathering. But so how would you recommend using automation in your telemetry approach? And can the rise of AI help in this setting, do you reckon? Can I start with you, Andre?
Yeah. So two things. I think I kind of alluded in my previous point that sending large volumes of data to any model is almost a non-starter. If I were to take every one of my alerts and send it as a prompt, I would probably not be able to figure out what's going on. I get a 50% good hallucinations, 50% not so good hallucinations, and it would cost me a lot of money. So I think that everything that Tiani said earlier about, what is the context, what part of the business flow this is, and minimizing the amount of information that either a human or in this case an AI needs to consider and provide that context around this, so that instead of just looking at like a single alert, you say like, okay, data is flowing through these systems. Here is the metric that triggered this. Here is a couple of lines of logs. I think that is actually both a more focused, smaller amount of data that can be genuinely processed through a model, and to then drive automation, possibly all the way to creating a PR to fix a problem if it also has access to the code, or has access to a coding agent. I'm very optimistic about this flow becoming increasingly more automated. You could argue to what extent you need a human in the loop, but hopefully increasingly less so, or maybe decreasingly less so, but I think that is helpful. One other key point, I'm sorry, I'm taking long, is that what I think is also important is that, to the extent that they can be better structured, semantically defined, helps a lot in any model to say that, like, okay, this is coming from a database, this is coming from a message broker, this is a gRPC method that I'm invoking, this is the client, this is the server. What the OpenTelemetry project is helping with is to lay down some of the foundations about these semantic conventions that, within a particular context, helps you to say, like, okay, this is what I'm talking about. This is the type of the thing that I'm dealing with, which then again helps both a human or a process or an AI agent to more efficiently, correctly automate actions based on that information. So I'm very passionate about, driving not just OpenTelemetry semantic conventions, but in driving a definition, a top-down definition of what is the system that we are dealing with, and how the observability signals are describing that system semantically.
Wow. That's a pretty good one. I know it's hard to follow, but Tiani, do you have something? Good luck.
I don't think I can add too much to that. I think I would summarize from the standpoint from of at least just what I've thought about on this topic in terms of automation, is that we've said this in various ways in the past half hour. So I don't think the automation should exist again just to collect more telemetry. So it's gonna, I think it should be a helper for shortening time to orientation, protecting attention, turning incidents into learning. Keeping that at the forefront is important for any automation that you create. And the AI could then help as maybe a sense-making assistant in some respects. So correlating some signals, maybe summarizing what's changed, maybe proposing queries or drafting stakeholder update kind of thing. But it has to be grounded in evidence. It has to keep humans accountable for decisions. So I think it's wise use of the tools for automation and for helping with analysis kind of thing.
Nice. That's very nice. I mean, what I usually say is that, like, if you can't follow up on someone, just challenge them. So I'm going to challenge Andre, because there's nothing else I can do at this point. You've covered it all up. According to you, do you reckon, like, AI in the process of, like, or according to you as well, Chani, AI in the process of, like, like capturing those logs, and if you use them, like, you use like labeled data, like you were saying, trying to refine it to save on processing costs, training your model, etc. Are you using it to then take some actions when the problem arises, or are you trying to maybe look beyond that and offer, like, what like a K cluster modeling can offer, which is something like surfacing problems you didn't know you had, if that makes sense? Because that's another way AI can look into things, is by finding patterns that a human wouldn't find them. So, Andrew, Tiani, what do you want?
So I think that AI is a fairly broad term.
Yes, it is.
I think that has been around for a while, and one of the more longer term aspect of it is clustering, is to be able to identify things that are similar. And I think that is really relevant to reduce the volume of data or to find things that are occurring, frequently, just to differentiate them from a generative AI, which just inherently probably not the best tool to reduce large volumes of data. It does reduce data, but not necessarily large volumes of data. So I think if you combine those AI techniques together, in one hand, you could narrow down that this is the area that I want to focus. This is the, cluster of problem that I want to deal with. This is the relevant metrics and logs associated with it. And now, how do I go about, well, at least explaining what this means? But even I'm going further, typically, is to say that, like, okay, how do I actually propose a solution to that problem, preferably in the form of a code change?
Yep.
I don't know if I want to propose an architectural change, but at least in a code change that would say, like, okay, based on what I'm observing, I think that this is what is causing your failure and this is how you fix it. And I think Tioni's point is very important. At one point, you do want people to have trust and to have oversight and a level of control over this process. I just think that I'm very excited, especially over the past couple of months, how that shifts from only be able to explain simple things to actually being able to come up with relatively high fidelity solutions to problems. Yet I don't just blindly merge things that the PR that an AI generated still.
Of course, but you see an improvement in accuracy of the answers, and okay, that's great. Yeah. Gianni, do you want to conclude?
Nothing to add.
No, okay,
Good.
fine. You can mic drop and walk away.
Yeah.
No, thank you. That was very good. I think we are now nearing the last question. So I was hoping that, like we didn't have to worry so much about time. And I said, oh, this question you're gonna have to answer in one sentence. But because we have plenty of time, you can actually answer it in more than one sentence. So this is for me a way to wrap up this, but also to give like a key takeaway to like the people watching us, and we're going to watch this as being recorded. But what does good observability means to you, and what is your number one advice to achieve it? So I'm going to start with Tiani. What is good observability and your number one advice to achieve it?
Number one advice. Oh my goodness. Let's see. Okay, so good observability makes the system legible to the people responsible for it. So allows you to see things, not always see answers, but see where things are out of balance and see where you can go dig deeper. And so my number one advice is to embed it into the rituals and the ways of working, whether it's release reviews, incident reviews, weekly health check, whatever the work is that's happening for the particular audience and how they do things, that observability is available where and when they need it. So they aren't just shelfware.
That's really good. I really like it. Like it's another like powerful sentence that you just said is like, observability is not about answers, it's about like, imbalance. It's about like, really like helping you balancing out what you need to. And yeah, I guess having it as part of your daily routine, like almost like your daily care to your engineering product. That's very good. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I hope you've taken note, people, because it's a good line to say to your manager tomorrow at the stand up, Andre, what's the second good line you could say to like other engineers that stand up?
Well, maybe this is going to be overlapping a little bit, but I think that good observability leads to a understanding of your system, understanding of your system behavior. Everything else is just data. To the extent that the observability information allows you to learn and to understand and to reason and to improve how your system operates, either as a first level, second level operation people to say like, okay, I understand that this thing is not working because this data is flowing in, because someone started a marketing campaign and there's like 2,000 new users that are pounding on our site, or there's a Super Bowl and everybody's betting, or like whatever the thing is rather than looking at things independently of each other to think about this as a system. And especially what I'm really passionate about is as an architect, to be able to use this information almost every day or at least every sprint and say like, okay, nothing has broken, but I see how my system behaves. These are the points of failures. These are the places where data going through my system is being choked because I try to, push this into a Postgres database and that doesn't scale. Or like, how do I continuously be able to use this information to improve both my day-to-day operation as well as my week-to-week, month-to-month architecture?
Yeah, that's really good. Like that actually, like when you were talking, it just made me think of like a few instances where the BBC, we didn't see things coming. One was like I think 5 or 6 years ago, like we had like Strictly Come Dancing, which is like a very famous show where stars go dancing, and basically people, members of the public, are asked to vote, and in order to vote, they need to log in. The amount of password requests, I've forgotten my password request we got within 10 minutes of the voting window open was like in the millions. I kid you not. We got a million emails saying, can you remind me of my password so that people could actually vote? We didn't see that one coming. And then the other one was, again, a user thing, was Glastonbury, which is a huge festival music. And at the end of Glastonbury, there's a curfew. And somehow at the end of the curfew, we put everyone onto the homepage of our service. And so there was already some other people on the homepage service, just like, looking at news or doing whatever. And then suddenly we had like a huge amount of like people watching the live stream just go onto the homepage, and the homepage crashed, obviously, because it didn't crash. It just took 5 minutes to recover. Like people were just loading and stuff. So you're right. Being able to know your user behavior, I mean, the external part that isn't the product itself, but what integrates with it, is equally as important as what you have in it. So thank you for that wisdom. Pretty good. All right. Is there anything either of you would like to add before I call a closure on this conversation?
This is fun.
Oh,
Yeah, it's good. Yeah. I think we should just stop recording and just carry this somewhere, like just the three of us. Okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Tiani. Thank you, Andre, for your participation. I am now bringing this conversation about what's your telemetry data really trying to tell you to an end. It is being recorded. Feel free to watch it in your own time. And yeah, hopefully you'll be able to shine from today or Monday onwards, when your new higher ups ask about what telemetry means to you and observability. So take care, everyone. Bye.
You.